Hey Malcolm, good to see you again.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so we were tweeting about this and I was talking to a friend about it. And so once upon a time, like in 2013-ish, wow, like 10 years ago, I used to kind of nerd out about to-do list apps, productivity stuff, how to think about planning your tasks and calendars and stuff. And I once wrote a blog post based on, I remember I had read a book. It's not important, but I wrote a post titled like I was in like this manic inspired state, and I wrote a post titled "Productivity apps shouldn't have you filling buckets; they should be igniting fires." Right, like roughly a remix of that apocryphal the quote by the guy who wrote The Little Prince. Something about
Oh, yeah.
don't
Say
drum up.
Exuperate, right? He's like
Exactly.
learning is not about filling
Buckets,
buckets. It's
yeah.
about
So
lighting
I'm like,
fires.
yeah, why does my life feel like I'm trying to fill a bucket with like this droopy tiny little piss droplets of water, when I know that sometimes I'm a fire hose, right? Sometimes I'm like, there's so much stuff coming out, and
Right.
I almost can't even keep track of it as it's happening. And then the half the time, or like most of the time back then, it felt like I'm trying to fill a bucket and it's like little drops, and it's like, is this, can I get more drops in? And that post went kind of viral, and someone even made an app, but it's since been discontinued. But someone made an app entirely based on that blog post. They're like, oh, this is so inspiring. Like, yeah, we feel it. We all feel like we are low drips of water people trying to fill buckets, and we want to feel kind of ignited and inspired. And for a period of time, I used to think, well, we should have some prosthesis, some secondary thing that helps us do this better. But then where my personal journey brought me was, oh, maybe I'm just using what kind of app would I like as a kind of thinking environment. And what I really need to change is my way of thinking, my way of being. And that has been good for me. I have become a more productive person, quote unquote. And
Mhm.
I feel like I inhabit the lighting fires context more than filling buckets context. But so someone asked me, hey, if you could do a startup, what would you do? And I was like, oh no, you're dragging me back into this. I feel the call, right? Like
Yeah.
like, oh, I could start thinking about this. And part of it is I can't think about this casually, offhand. Like, I mean, I could, but like the thing that I'm kind of dramatic about this. I feel like if I'm gonna think about it, I want to think very, very hard about it with people who have also thought very hard about it, and
Yeah.
like really make a contribution. I think part of it might be that. It's very common for people who are starting out on their personal journeys to write like 101 stuff, like, oh, I'm learning about productivity. Here are like the basic principles, and it is
Yeah.
good that people do that. Everyone should reinvent the
Yeah.
wheel and learn the
Yeah.
stuff.
Exactly. Totally.
But I guess I got excited thinking about how, well, if I were, so now I'm on this path, which is like, okay, if I'm gonna be thinking about productivity stuff, and when I say productivity again, I don't necessarily mean the mainstream understanding of it, but like my understanding of it. And I was gonna think, well, if I was gonna start a company, well, maybe I should just work with whoever I think is already doing it well, or is already thinking very hard about it. And like you were one of the first people that came to mind. I was like, oh, is Malcolm is doing something with Complice that might not be identical to my idea of like lighting fires versus filling buckets, but you have thought about that a lot over the course of the work that you do. And I just realized that we never kind of explicitly sat down to discuss this thing. It's like one of those things where like, like siblings realizing, oh, we've never introduced ourselves to each other, right? Because we just kind of, you were born and raised together. And so you never sat down and be like, hi, I'm your sister. Nice to meet you, like, and so similarly, it's like when I found your blog, I felt like I related to you in some way in how you were thinking about like, oh, it's not just about the tasks, but it's about purpose and meaning and whatever.
Yeah.
And we never actually sat down to discuss it. So I was thinking we should try and speed run a discussion of it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, there's something about that too, where like, uh, it, this morning, like I woke up and I was like, I'm gonna text Visa so that he knows that we maybe have this call. And Jess was like, I didn't realize you and Visa were so close. I've seen you texting him a bunch. And that's partially like just that we've been scheduling this call, but I think it's partially also it's like you and I have a kind of a closeness born of shared purpose and shared meaning making and a bunch of like we're watching the Twitter space in very similar ways and talking about that periodically. But in other ways we have not been that close. There's lots of things that we have never talked about because we've only had at most a dozen face-to-face conversations, right? So it's like, even though we've been in all the same spaces, it's like, well, are we close? It's like, well, yes, but like, you know, not like there's still tons of just low-hanging fruit probably to pick of like stuff to talk about, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's like trust, right? Like, so like I used to joke about one of my friends that I would trust him with my life, but not my wallet. because and similarly, it's like there are ways in which like someone who sees you crying at a bar knows you better than like all of your friends to whom you might not share that kind of thing. And I always think whenever I go on military reservists at the like smoking corners, you will hear guys talk about like, oh, I'm thinking of getting a divorce, right? And you get to eavesdrop on that conversation because none of the guys there are going to see each other except in that context like a year later. So it's totally fine to be completely. Yeah. So we have this kind of thing. I think you mentioned at some point, like we can say things to each other because like our social graphs aren't completely embedded either. So we can like say shit sometimes and not worry that, oh, how will that affect this and that and this and that. And so that's pretty cool.
But nonetheless, this we're intending to put on the internet, broadly speaking, maybe. And so, you know, obviously we could not do that, but
oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, let's.
Yeah, it's funny to me that we've never actually discussed what I mean. We talked about Complice a bit in our last session or a couple of sessions ago or whatever.
Yeah.
But like even then, that conversation was very much, oh, we know each other and these are the specific things we want to get into. And I feel like the conversation that I want to be having that I've realized that we have not had is like, what if we just met and we don't know each other, right? And we're like, oh, what do you think about to-do list apps? You know,
right. Almost as if one of our friends said, you know, oh hey, Visa, you should meet. You should talk to this guy Malcolm, like, and you're like, like you're coming in like all you know about me is like I'm a guy you should talk to about to-do list apps.
Yeah, like, right. And so yes, tell me about your thoughts on to-do list apps and or calendar apps, or you know, what's the deal with them?
Yeah. So I guess at a really high level, I would maybe categorize all of these as like workflow apps. And workflow, I guess, is my sort of broad terminology for the kind of thing that you said, I think, near the beginning of like, you know, to-do lists, calendars, like anything that integrates your anything that is interfacing with your process of figuring out what to do and doing it.
Okay, interfacing with your process. Okay. And
so it's, I mean, in some sense, like any tool you use is part of that. But there's sort of somewhat a distinction, at least, between like, if you imagine the thing that you're doing is like painting your room. And I was doing some Complice user interviews recently, Complice being the app that I've made. And one person said they actually used Complice for like painting the house that they just bought or something like that, and like renovating and whatever. And they said they used the app, but they would make their list and then they would print out their list and like tape it to their coveralls or whatever, and just like cross stuff off with a pen like throughout the day. And so you know, and so it's like, is their paintbrush a workflow tool? And it's like, well, no, I would say, broadly speaking, like you could call it that, but at that point everything's a workflow tool. You know, but you could say, okay, when you're making food, your recipe is a workflow tool. It's like helping you organize your attention and how you're seeing things. Now, as I say that, I'm thinking about Dave Chapman's comments about meta-systematicity and meta-rationality, and his comments about how even when people are doing really systematic scientific processes, if you actually film them and watch how they do what they're doing, they actually use a lot of the situation itself to organize what they need to do. So it's like, do you need a to-do list to clean your room?
Do you?
Most people don't, I think.
Yeah.
They may need some sort of thing that causes them to become motivated to clean their room, like
Right.
there's a guest coming over or something.
Right.
But once they've decided to clean their room, the room is the to-do list. You look
Yes.
around the room,
Yeah.
and you're like, that's out of place. It needs to go
Yeah.
over here.
Yeah.
This is like, you've got to move this over. Like, there's the room is the to-do list. The situation affords all of the, and the situation makes visible all of the problems that it has.
Right.
You know, and this is actually the best form of to-do list is simply situated embodied physical cognition. So it's like, if you need to remember that tomorrow morning when you go out, you need to take the book with you to give it back to your friend, put the book on your shoes.
Yeah. Yeah.
No to-do list required, right?
Right. Yeah. There's a funny thing. So even as we speak, right? Like, so the past yesterday and today, I have been cleaning out like a bunch of, I have like, it's off screen, but I have like a bunch of paperwork that was just piling up on a shelf. And I was trying to convince myself that it didn't bother me, but it's been bothering me. And again, the phrase "it's been bothering me," what does that mean? Right? But when I went through it and I like sorted out like 80% of it, and then I went out to go and buy dinner, I felt like a relief of tension in my shoulders and chest. And so in a certain frame, I was using tension in my chest and shoulders to remind me to do something, but I was ignoring it, right? And I've seen other people say things like, oh, you use your open tabs as a kind of to-do list or reminder of stuff, or you use your desk, your messy desk. The things on your desk are meant to remind you in a certain way, but you can kind of cross over into a threshold where, you know, each object had some meaning, and then it reaches like overflows. Right? Is that what Stack Overflow is about? You reach some point where there's a Stack Overflow, and you just get overwhelmed. And yeah, you know, just thinking about that has been illuminating. I mean, I've had this insight before, so I feel sometimes like I'm cursed to repeat these cycles of re-realization. And there's something in there about
until you really get it.
Right? Yeah.
And I think it would be possible to really get it. I don't think I have really gotten, you know, exactly this insight. Like, I've been, you know, continuing to lament how poorly optimized like operating systems and browsers actually are for managing attention. Like,
this is what I want to talk about, right? Nice.
Like I think, you know, like there's a company called the Browser Company that's making a new browser.
I've heard about this.
I've heard it's good. I think it's Mac only at the moment, so I haven't tried it. But I would really like to. And I'm like somewhat optimistic about what they're doing. I'm like, I think there's a chance that they are actually like figuring out the right problem. But I also think that they're probably not going deep enough along some dimensions, and they're probably not going wide enough along others or something. I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
But like the reality is, like there's a bunch of different browser workflows that you can have, and you know, one of them is and people have hybrids of them. People flow between them. I've known some people who manage to keep no browser tabs open a lot of the time. I don't know many people like that, but I know some. And then it's like, if we're hanging out and there are computers nearby and we find a question we want to Google, they will open their browser, Google the question, we find the answer, and then they close the browser.
It, yeah.
It's like, wow, like that's really cool. Like there's a quality of single tasking to that that's really beautiful. It's like they've ceased to use the browser as a to-do list. And one of the issues I think that's part of this is that we have a tension between which of the open tabs are sort of like they're open because they represent something something I need to get to. Which of them are open present context? Like right now I have our Twitter DM chat open where we were starting to talk about some of this. It's sort of in the background of the videos. If I close that, I wouldn't be like, oh, there's something I need to get to, because like the reason I have it open is just because I need to reference it for this, right?
Yeah.
And then I also have a couple tabs open to various roams of mine and my different Accomplice, like sort of dashboards and stuff like that. And those are more just like, those are open all the time, basically.
Right.
And you know, that's like having them open is basically like having my file cabinet unlocked. It's just like,
have you seen Brett Victor's comic about seeing spaces?
I don't know.
You can Google it. It's like a one slide thing, but it's basically this as well. It's this idea that it's what you're saying as well about the situation kind of shaping the thing,
Yeah.
right? Like, so it's like being able to see all of the potential outcomes. For example, I'll just link to it, I guess. But that's one of the things that shaped my thinking on this. And yeah, so I also want to draw like the idea of what were you saying? You're saying about browsers being not necessarily ideal. I think one of the things that may be a path to getting it right is basically to be more, I mean, the phrase human centric is a bit, I don't know if that becomes like a stock phrase people use and then gets cliche. But like so Twitter, for example, has it used to have a 140 character limit and now it's a 280 character limit. And that was initially a constraint born out of like SMS, like texting thing. So they just copied over the texting thing. But intentionally or unintentionally, it made short message, brain to brain info transmission. There's something optimal about that, in that constraint, that it containerizes the thoughts and makes it less likely that any one thought is going to be like overwhelming to the point where somebody else can't interface with it. I'm not doing it justice, but again, we talked as well about how we want these videos to be short, and I don't know if this one's going to be a short one, but like there's something useful to constraints, right? Like it makes things easier to interface with, easier to operate with.
I mean, I don't think we really can. So that's one thing that we didn't talk about before we just like threw on the recording. But when we hopped on this call, I was thinking it wouldn't be super short. I was thinking we'd probably talk for like an hour. And then you gestured something about it being short, and I was like, oh, I don't know how
we did not make that clear.
Straightforwardly, we have at least half an hour of stuff to say about this, and there's so many rabbit holes. Like, we could do a short video where like Malcolm tells you about Accomplice, like that's a like thing we could do as a short video. But if we're trying to just like explore the spaces of to-do lists, I think it would not do the topic justice to try to make it short. Like,
but I mean, we're never going to do the topic justice, right? So that's the, I guess, that's the idea of like repeating.
Yeah, fair. I mean, I guess there's a sense in which, given half an hour or an hour, we could kind of loop around and kind of
that's true.
Feel into a bunch of things in the space. If we want to do any topic, any kind of justice in a 5 to 10 minute video, that would look more like biting off a piece and being like, like we could stop this video now-ish and
but it hasn't,
and call it something like situated to-do lists, right? But it hasn't borne its fruit yet.
Exactly. There's some sweet spot that you find, and then you got it like, oh yeah, okay, that was, now I feel like I'm gonna share this with somebody because they need to hear that, because so like I've brought up constraints a few times, the lighting fires buckets a few times, but I feel like there's something that we have between us that we have not yet kind of sliced at. And I trust that we'll probably get to it in the next, I don't know, some amount of time.
Yeah. So I'll just jump in and say something about Accomplice and constraints, because I think that's a good
go for it.
piece. So Accomplice is an extremely opinionated piece of software, as I mentioned to you in our marketing.
I like that, yeah.
And structurally, so sort of one of the opinions is your to-do list shouldn't get stale. And for a while, I thought I would somehow add some planning features into Accomplice, but it has so far not seemed to need that. I mean, people ask for it, but in practice, like lots of people love using Accomplice without that. And so how it currently maintains this lack of staleness. And staleness is a great metaphor, because I think everybody basically knows what I mean when I say a stale to-do list. Right? Yeah. Like it's immediately obvious, even though that is actually sort of a new metaphor.
Right. And to tie it back, like so I have a bookshelf above my here, and I remember when I installed it, I was very excited about putting books there that I'm excited about, that I wake up like, oh yeah, these books that I want to think about this, I want to think about that, I want to connect. And it's been there now for like a year, and I can look at it now and I feel, it's kind of stale. Like it's done. It's even without having read all of the books. Like I've read a couple of them, I've flipped through some pages and stuff, and it's done what it needs to do. And now it would do me good to take them all off, put them back in my main shelf, and then start looking again like, what 10 books do I want to kind of bounce ideas off of?
Yeah.
So there is that renewal thing. And I think there was a time, like maybe 10 years ago or something, where I would have felt bad about that. I'm like, oh no, but I made this plan, and I is it cheating, or is it like, am I like screwing myself over or not limiting myself, but like, am I going off course from what I set out to do? But now I'm like, no, it's like at every step, like, so you make the plan, it serves you in some way and it brings you to a new state. And the new state, you need to like reinvigorate and restructure. That's how I currently think about it, which is like renew the thing.
Totally. And there's, there's a tension here on some level between like, if people will say, well, but you need to be able to commit somewhat, otherwise you'll never finish anything.
True.
And I see the value of finishing and committing as something that you can incorporate into the ongoing planning process.
Yes.
So it's like, you don't want to just be like doing everything whimsically, how you feel in this moment, and sort of breaking commitments on that basis. Right. And by commitments here, I partially just mean like if you start going to university or whatever, you don't want to like suddenly drop out of university on a whim. Like that's like, it's like, hang on a sec, like that's a big decision. Like think about it, feel into it, feel into the different futures, feel into your alternate possibilities, in general, I wouldn't recommend, breaking up a long-term relationship just sort of on a whim, like feel into it, think about it. Like, but that's in terms of the sort of decision tree. Locally, in terms of what you do in each moment, you kind of want to do what you feel like doing in each moment, but you want to do what you feel like doing in each moment in the context of everything else that you care about long term. And so like, you might be, doing your, you're partway through your degree and you're like, oh, I've got a bunch of homework due on Monday. And then on Saturday, one of your friends is like, hey, we're going to go cliff jumping with this waterfall hike thing. And you're just like, wow, I mean, I have a lot of work I need to get done, but that would be amazing. Like, and so it's like, you neither want to just sort of forget about your work and go do it, nor do you want to say, oh no, I can't, I've got work to do. No, I really want to, like, because that's sort of like a pushing, but you want to sort of be like, I have a lot of work to do, and I really want to go to this thing. And ideally, you find a place where you feel like you could be totally free to go, even though you've got a lot of work to do. And you could be totally free to do all the work that you want to do, even though you'd really like to go. And you could feel that those are both like real options that you can have. And then from there, you choose. And there's not a right answer.
I mean, like the last like
put it all in context.
Like the last 20 to 30 seconds of what you just embodied, right? Like I wish I had encountered that when I was like 23, 24. Because I used to go to work, right? And I would struggle to do anything else as long as I felt I had things that were overdue. Like, and there was always stuff overdue because we were operating, and I was, like my colleagues were great, my boss was great, but I was like in this self-imposed. And so this was my school board, sort of, like, and back when I was in school and I didn't do homework and like the teachers are going to scold me. And like, so I've internalized that. I used to internalize that teacher thing where I'm like, I remember my office, my company would be having like a milestone celebration, like, oh, we've crossed this much in revenue and whatever, we're going to crack open some wine and enjoy ourselves. And I would be there with the wine and I'd be like, oh no, I haven't shipped my blog post. I'm fucking up. I'm not. And I'm like, looking back, I'm like, huh. And the worst example of this was once, it was New Year's Eve and like me and my wife are at home and I'm doing work and I'm looking back, oh my God, why are you working on New Year's Eve? I'm like, you can let it slip for a day and like work on it the next day. But in that moment, I was so caught up in that thing. And I'm like, wow, anything that helps me. And the thing is, it's not even like that state meant I was productive. That's the irony / tragedy / comedy, right?
I mean, that's the real issue.
Yeah, like, so if doing that meant that, oh man, I'm crushing it at work, then I'd be like, okay, I'm crushing it at work, so I got like whatever we can celebrate and stuff. But I wasn't even crushing it at work, so I was just crushing myself, right? Which now I can laugh about. But at the time, oh man, it was so tragic. And part of why I want to talk about these things is, well, so again, there's the app stuff, there's the tool stuff, and there's the how you're thinking about it stuff. And it's just, like, I appreciate even now, like at this point in us knowing each other for so many years, I appreciate that you are able to present that vibe of I want to do this thing, I want to do this thing too, and I'm gonna find a way that's okay. Like you can do that, that's legal, that's allowed. Like oh shit, like it's still helpful for me to hear it. So thanks, that's awesome.
Yeah. And this is something that I've been like, as I've been thinking about growing Accomplice more over the past months. I just in the last month, I came to this place of like, well, actually, no, this has sort of been a process this whole year of realizing I actually don't want to talk about Accomplice so much in terms of productivity, but in terms of intentionality.
Nice.
And what's cool about that is that like you can intentionally be resting.
Yes.
Right? Like you can intentionally be playing.
Yes.
You can intentionally be like wandering around campus unintentionally, you know, like
that's so good.
Like, you know, and so I actually just recently wrote up a new post on this. This just is called Intentionality, Not Productivity.
That's beautiful. Yeah. I just Googled intentionality app, and it's like, you know, like, yeah, Accomplice is like fourth. And the other things are not nonsense. And yeah, it's a great phrase, right? Because it's one of those things where the phrase itself creates a frame that challenges the person to think about the phrase. Like you can't escape thinking about it if those are the first two words, right? So that's a very clever thing to do. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. That's cool. I hadn't actually quite thought about that, but yeah, like the Accomplice like URL now, or like you know, homepage title now says Accomplice Intentionality app.
Yeah, and so yeah, so it's because it's such a nice, you know, and like in a broader context, or just things that I've been thinking about a lot. I've been thinking a lot about you know, kind of there's some orthodoxy and then there's some heterodoxy. Like, you know, you counter the thing by, but you can't do it by saying not the thing. And this also ties in with like what we were talking about elsewhere about towardsness and awareness, right? Like you can't fight X by saying let's be anti-X, because the frame is still X. And intentionality is such a lovely orthogonal kind of, like we're not for or against productivity. We just want to think about intentionality.
Let's face it, being productive is great.
It's great, yeah.
And it's only part of a good life. And it also, like, part of what was so striking when I dug into it, like when I just set out to write this thing, I was like, okay, what's going on with productivity? Where did the concept of productivity came from? It came from management. It came from somebody trying to streamline people's work and make them all work exactly the same way about 130 years ago in that strange, you know, Frederick Winslow Taylor and all that. And it was the idea of, you know, optimizing and becoming more efficient. Like those concepts are very closely linked. Productivity is external, legible work. It's not about, like, creativity, you know, is another concept, right? And productivity and creativity, originally speaking, like when the word productivity came to mind, had nothing to do with each other.
Right.
Yeah, so it's just, there's something there, I think that's I don't know, it's quite striking. Like I think about that, and so when I think about workflows, like I think about, like, you know, you could talk about how do you optimize your workflow for productivity, and it's like, well, that's going to be output, right? How do you optimize your workflow for intentionality? It's like, that's a slightly different question. It's like, you know, and it's sort of the, you know, when people take stimulants, whether caffeine or Ritalin or whatever else, they can often find them like, wow, yeah, I was really productive, but I sort of like, I kind of got tunneled on, you know, whether it's some specific little bug that they were fixing that wasn't that important, or whether it's like literally they were going to do their homework, but like before they did their homework, they like just started cleaning out their closet a little bit, and then they spent the whole day, you know, cleaning out their closet because like that was really satisfying. And it was, but they sort of they lost the kind of awareness of like, what do I really want to be doing right now?
Right.
Now, sometimes you can blow that open and it also gets really weird. Like, you know, I've had this experiment of like taking days to just do whatever I feel like in each moment, and like really not be trying to intend further forward than that. And I had one a couple days ago for the first time in a while. And it was really weird. Like, I was like, what do I want to do? And I like looked at I had some various lists of things. I looked at those lists and I was like, there's a lot of exciting stuff on this list. but how do I choose? And I just sat with the discomfort of being like, I have no idea how to choose what I want to do right now. And I ended up reading a bunch of friends' manifestos that I happened to come across in my Google Docs. Like I reread a bit of yours. I read, I sort of glanced at the table of contents of Tashin's book. I read this cool thing called Undoing the Pain by Fiora Eterna, which is like very much about how to live a good life. And it was really cool. It's like, I wouldn't have kind of taken the time to read those if I'd been in the mode of like, I've gotta like,
Right.
gotta punch
Yeah.
out more stuff. But like,
Right.
I got a lot out of reading her thing, and it linked me to
Yeah.
another. I was like, oh yeah, okay, this is like, I'm finding new pathways because I've released all of the pressure that keeps me going down my usual pathways.
Nice.
But that's
Yeah.
hard to do. Like that's
It
hard to
is.
do just literally with open browser tabs. It's hard to do.
Right.
Like the only
Right.
way I can have a day like this is I start the day with no open tabs.
I feel for me, I feel like I have a recent recurring theme for me is that I've been a little bit in denial about the way writing does this for me. Like if I've published, I feel relief, and then I feel more like expanded awareness, kind of looking around what's going on. But if I haven't published anything that I'm proud of for like a month, 2 months, 3 months, I start to get really tense. And I've my challenge for myself right now is I have to be honest with myself about that. Like a part of me is like, oh no, you shouldn't let your publishing or lack of publishing affect your mental state, whatever. Maybe that's some enlightened stage I'll reach someday. But in the meantime, like if I'm pretending that that's not true when it's true, then it's like I'm away from myself. The other thing I wanted to make sure to include was I saw a friend mention something about you know productive. I don't know if it's productivity, but the thing that came to for me was that to-do lists and like tickets and whatever, it's like it's sort of like scaffolding. So if you're building some and your intention, let's say you have an intention of building a cathedral, right? So the scaffolding will help because you can you fill in your own metaphor for how the scaffolding helps. But then like there's an issue where like the scaffolding supplier wants to sell you more scaffolding, and you can get really caught up in what's the principles of scaffolding, and then you just have this elaborate tiers and tiers of scaffolding that might be like more than the mass of the thing that you're building itself. And it feels gratifying because it feels like you're learning how to scaffold better, right? And there's just that whole world you can get swept up in. And then the question you have to ask yourself is, well, is the scaffolding serving what you want? Right. And at that point, it's like people are like, what do you want? No, I'm like, big scaffolding is selling me more scaffolding. So this is what I'm doing.
Yeah. And I think like, people often get fixated on proxy measures of productivity and forget
exactly
before. And they do this in part because, handling workflows can be stressful, right? So it's like, okay, inbox zero. What good happens if you achieve inbox zero? What's good about inbox zero?
Yeah, so I haven't in a while, but the last time I did, it's just this sense of lightness and doneness, and which there may be less costly, less tedious ways to achieve. But like the good feeling is just this feeling of freshness, right? Like this, like my life feels so open-ended now. It's like I could do anything. I don't have anyone waiting on me, blah, blah, blah.
Right. So to me, that feels kind of like an awareness motivation.
To have inbox zero?
Yeah.
Or to
You're
want?
like,
yeah.
I'm free from all of that burden of all of this stuff.
Right. Yeah.
I've dealt with it. All the problems have gone away now until they start piling up again, which they will.
Right.
But the thing I really want to highlight is that nowhere in the description of inbox zero is actually anything having been achieved.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I got inbox. Okay, I can get inbox zero too. Watch, I'll just go archive everything.
Delete. Yeah.
Delete. Now obviously that's not what people mean when they say inbox zero. Like that's sort of declaring inbox bankruptcy is sort of more the thing, which is also a thing people do. But like, one way to achieve inbox zero is you just take all the stuff from your inbox, you put it in your to-do list, and now your inbox is empty. Okay, what has been done? Nothing.
I can imagine for some people doing that might feel good in some way if they had not considered that it's a possibility, and they were like, they had the burnt in.
Do it. It feels good.
But you're right. Yeah,
but if all you've done is move the intentions from here to there, you've not actually
Yeah, agreed.
Like that's all scaffolding, I guess,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
use your metaphor. Like
There's
that's
a
all
strange,
scaffolding.
yeah. There's a strange. Sometimes if you've been like over indexed in a certain way, and like it's like when the screen is burnt in, and then you kind of switch
Mm,
everything to another screen, even though you've done nothing. Something about that initiative can be satisfying, but you're gonna have the same problem within minutes or within hours or whatever if you don't get to
totally.
it, right?
I'm not saying it can't be worth it. Like it can be for various reasons. It can be a helpful scaffold. It's worth tracking like the difference between actually doing stuff and organizing your list. So I want to just briefly kind of, I was going to lay out something here about compulse and constraints. So the
Wait,
basic
hold on a second.
workflow.
We have my Zoom call ends in 2 minutes, so we
Yeah,
should end the recording and start another one.
just like yeah, I'll
I'll
send you a link.
Okay, sweet. End this now. Wait, I just stopped recording first. How do I? I'm just gonna upload it with the thing saying stop recording.